G'day and welcome to Brisbane, capital of Queensland, Australia, on a Thursday afternoon, about 1:30 in the afternoon. I'm coming to you live, well, pre-recorded, from Mount Cootha, the best views in town, as you can see behind me, and I will get out of the road and let you see some of it. CBD, you can see clear to the islands in Moreton Bay. So, seeing this as a geology program, I'll give you a bit of geology. Now, what you're standing on is actually called the Inaugural Granite. So it was an intrusion sort of between 215 and 230 million years ago, when it was party central here in Brisbane when it comes to volcanic activity. And we had two actual periods of volcanic activity. So around about 210 million years ago to 230 million years ago. And then around about 20 to 30 million years ago, when we passed over hotspot, well, this particular bit of Queensland passed over a hotspot. So what you're standing on is considerably uplifted, and quite a few kilometres of erosion had to take place in order for this to become, how far is it above sea level? It's 280 metres above sea level. So I'll give you a roundup of what happened geology-wise with this part of the world. So there were four main episodes. So 370 to 350 million years ago, I was standing in the deep ocean on the ocean plate side of a subduction zone. This was deep ocean. The subduction zone itself probably would have been around about Ipswich, where the trench was, Toowoomba, which is that away. That would have been on the continental shelf, and out past Dalby, which was the coastline, the beach, you had your volcanic mountain chain as part of the subduction zone, and there was also a little bit of volcanic activity happening in the ocean as well. There was an island arc, and that got accreted. So 235 to 215 million years ago, it was party central. Because you had sort of a relaxing of the crust, and molten material either came out volcanoes or intruded into the bedrock, which is what this is. And then you had an accumulation of sediments between 65 and 23 million. Oh, sorry. Then you had an accumulation of sediments. 210 to 180 million years ago. So you had coal, and there's coal to be found out at Ipswich. And then between 65 and 23 million years ago, you had more soft sediment accumulated in lakes, and the eruption of basalt volcanoes as a result of the hotspot us passing over hotspot. So as I said, 300 to 400 million years ago, the eastern edge of the Aussie continent was way west of its present location. So unfortunately, I can't say I was neighbours with John Stockton, because I was in the deep ocean having a swim. So you had the Aussie crust on the west and the old ocean plate on the east. And while this was happening, of course, you know, you had your mountains happening because of the subduction story. You had your mountains erupting. You had sediments eroded from the mountains down rivers to the continental shelf where Toowoomba is, and then into subsea canyons, and you had some fans happening as well, but a chert deposited, and in the oceanic crust you had your basaltic lavas erupting. And the mixtures of sediments and volcanics were scraped off when the ocean floor was subducted westward beneath the continent. They became hardened and converted to rocks. If you're wondering what I'm looking at, it's the second edition of Rocks and Landscapes of Brisbane and Ipswich. Brilliant book. Okay, so then you had, as part of the subduction story, intense compression, folding, an uplift of the sediments. And this is where you get your Naranli fernvale beds and the Bunya phyllite, and then a bit further north, the Roxburgh greenstone and the Kawongba beds. And again, I suppose eastern Brisbane's probably still underwater by then. So the Naranli fernvale, the name Naranli comes from the suburb of Nerang, the Gold Coast, and Beenleigh, Bogan country. They were formerly called the Brisbane Metamorphics. These now underlie the western suburbs of Brisbane, where I am, parts of New Farm and Hamilton, and also Annerley and Carina, right down to the Gold Coast. So most of the rocks are metamorphosed, so grey-wacky and argillite. There's also some beds of quartzite and greenstone, which was previously basalt. In the Petrie area, north, you've got the Roxburgh greenstone and Kawongba beds, and they're separated from the other units to the west by the North Pine Fault. Now, these beds, the Naranli fernvale and the Roxburgh greenstone, they're thought to represent rocks from deeper in the subduction complex, because the greenstones have been metamorphosed under high pressures. And also the greenstones originally contained tuffs, so they may have been erupted from a series of volcanic islands to the east of the continent. So I can tell you that, so in the Naranli Fernvale beds, Fernvale is a town to the west of Brisbane in the Brisbane Valley, downriver from the Wivenhoe Dam. They copped it real bad in the 2011 floods, and I'll talk about those. So your Naranli Fernvale beds, argillite, which is hardened mudstone or shale, grey-wacky. So that's coarse-grained sediment of mixed composition. Your quartzite, which is recrystallised chert. And then you've got a red-brown variety of chert with iron oxide impurities, mainly northwest of Ipswich. The red soils, as you get there, and your green jasper, and then greenstone as well. And the Bunya phyllite, which you met the other day. Light to medium grey with layers of mica and quartz. We go now to the late Triassic, 226 to 210 million years ago. Hearty Central when it comes to, so you've got a thinned crust because the Coral Sea was opening up at this time. Eastern Australia had periods of subduction and then relaxation of the crust, and then subduction again, and then more relaxation. So 210 million years ago, Hardy Central, this is when Mount Cootha was made deep underground. So it either erupted through violent volcanoes, and also west of Brisbane, west of Brisbane you had a series of small volcanoes, and they poured out andesite and rhyolite lavas. And there were also explosive eruptions that resulted in layers of fragmental rocks like the Brisbane Tuff, which I'm going to show you too, not today, and breccias. So you've got your Brookfield Volcanics and Jolly's Lookout andesite. Now the Jolly's Lookout andesite is out near Samford to the northwest. I'll have to take you there, that's a lovely valley. And you've got underneath that, you've got your Samford granodiorite, which is another intrusion. So this is the Inaugural Granite, and then you've got Samford one, there's one a bit further north. So the Brisbane Tuff, which you can see at Kangaroo Point, is about 226 million years ago and was the product of either one or up to 4 different eruptions. And you can, and such activity widespread. You could even see it on Straddie, or up at Nambour, or even down in the Gold Coast hinterland. There are also local eruptions of basalt at Ipswich. So apart from the Inaugural Granite, which you're standing on, and the Samford granodiorite, you've also got to the further north the Mount Sampson granodiorite and the Karana quartz diorite. And also what happened with these these intrusions is it cooked the rocks directly around them, formed a lot of hornfells. I'm going to show you that when we visit the Inaugural Granite at my suburb, The Gap. You'll see those. And also you'll see some dikes as well. Actually, you can see some dikes here on Mount Cootha. It's in his book. So after that excitement, you had your sand and gravel being deposited again. So there's about 210 million years ago, and this is where you get your swamps out at Ipswich that forms the coal out there, but also around the eastern suburbs, Aspley and Tingalpa. Tingalpa was a very swampy suburb. You get your Aspley Formation and your Tingalpa Formation. So they're mainly shales, coal, sandstone. So by the late Triassic, you had Brisbane, part of the continent. There was a slight uplift in the late Triassic. However, from the late Triassic to the early Jurassic, 210 to 180 million years ago, the depositing of sediments resumed. So you had some sandstone at Landsborough, which is in the Sunshine Coast hinterland, not far from Steve Irwin's place. You had sandstones and siltstones and mudstones at Marburg. That's where the that's where the rain radar is. And at Walloon, out near Ipswich, you got your coals and a bit of sandstone. Now, around about 210 to 180 million years ago, you got your erosion happening, and that's when this guy started to come to the surface. And then, so you got your erosion happening, yada yada yada, and then between 31 and 23 million years ago, Party Central, volcanically, because we passed over the Aussie hotspot. So you got your volcanic plugs, the Glasshouse Mountains to the north of us, so Beerburn, Timbragargan, Elimba. They're old vents actually. To the south of us, you've got one of the largest erosion shield volcanoes in the world, Mount Warning, Mount Tambourine, sort of a vent of that. So you had a few things happening. So you did have violent volcanoes, but you did have a lot of shear volcanoes, and also there were a lot of cracks in the crust, so you had your basaltic lavas sort of happening as well. So close to Brisbane, you've got Mount Glorious, not far from me. And then you had deep weathering to get to where we are today. So she goes to the iPad because I don't print out. I'm environmentally conscious. So Mount Cootha is the eastern extent of the Taylor Range, originally called the Glen Morrison Range, and then I think by John Oxley, sort of in 1821, and someone came along and named it after Herbert Taylor. So this is the eastern extent, although it does extend into a few suburbs in Brisbane. Brisbane's very hilly. You got suburbs like Mount Gravatt, Red Hill, Spring Hill. The CBD is quite hilly. You can't really see it from here. My suburb of the Gap is really hilly. There's actually, if you go up Settlement Road towards Capera, that is a real nasty bike ride. I drive along there and watch the keen cyclists go up there. I actually passed a cyclist on my way up Mount Cootha, and I thought, you keen bugger. Well done. So what I also say about Brisbane, so I'm coming to you, I'm only about 8 k's from the CBD, the Central Business District of Brisbane, from here, really close. And just over there is the University of Queensland, St Lucia, Toowong. Hello Peter Orban, I know you live at St Lucia. You got the river creeping around, you got the mountains to the south, you can see clear to New South Wales today, it's so good. If you look far enough you can see the Bay Islands as well, but the reason I've got hat and sunnies and a shirt on, yes, it is the middle of winter here in Brisbane, and as you can see I'm just in a t-shirt. Zentnerd t-shirts available on my website, kathywilliams-devries.com. Even in the middle of winter, Brisbane is only 449 kilometres from the Tropic of Capricorn, so you've got to be really sun smart. The Cancer Council says slip, slop, slap, slip on a shirt, slap on sunscreen, slap on a hat and put your sunnies on as well to protect your eyes. So we have a tropical climate. Even today it's probably about, I think we got up to about 22 degrees Celsius. Doesn't get much below 10 degrees. At night you get the odd night that's 5 degrees. Out at Ipswich you can get below 0. Out at Stanthorpe where they grow all the apples, it can get below 0 there as well, but summers are pretty brutal because they're not only hot, they're humid. So it might only be 29 degrees, but it's probably 98% humidity. Plus we got a lot of swamps around the place. So breeding ground for mosquitoes and midges. So Mount Cootha is actually a national park now. And what I might say about the Taylor Range is around my suburb of the Gap, the Taylor Range actually splits into 2 different bits, the eastern and the western bit, and it kind of snakes around my suburb in a crab-like fashion, and then you get a gap where Waterworks Road comes through, and that's why they call it the Gap. It's pretty cool. When I first looked at it I thought, is that an old volcano? No, It's an old intrusion, and a lot of weathering has gone on, obviously, to reduce that gap. So, so this is a national park now. Now, Mount Cootha is actually derived from the Yuggera people, the name, because it was originally called One Tree Hill, because right on the top of Mount Cootha, and Australians being the masters of the bleeding obvious, called it One Tree Hill. But the Yuggera people here used to get honey here, and they called honey Cootha, and so that's where Cootha, Mount Cootha, came from. So that's pretty cool. So and I drove past it on my way here, well actually through it because I got a bit lost. We've got the Brisbane Botanical Gardens here. We've got the St Thomas Brisbane Planetarium. It's pretty cool. There's a bit of astronomy happening around here. All the TV towers are up here, obviously. And you've got heaps of bushwalks around here as well. You've got the JC Slaughter Falls, and I think associated with the falls there's a rock pool, and men are advised not to swim in the rock pool because they'll drown. There's an old Aboriginal curse there. So if you're a bloke, just don't swim in the pool. So so Cootha actually means honey mountain from the Aborigines. Now, a little bit about history of Brisbane. Brisbane was originally a penal colony. It's where Sydney sent their worst convicts. And originally, when they sent their convicts, they sent them to Redcliffe, which is north of Brisbane, before they sailed up the Brisbane River and realised that North Quay, which is now in the CBD, was the best place for a settlement. And you had a bloke called Logan overseeing the joint, and the convicts were fairly active in quarrying rock for the buildings around the place, sort of the government buildings, and that's how we got Kangaroo Point Cliffs, because the cliffs weren't originally cliffs. Yes, the river did do a little bit of digging, but the convicts did the rest. The Kangaroo Point Cliffs made out of Brisbane tuff, which is excellent stone for building. The cathedrals are made out of it, churches, and they also mix, they sort of grind up the Brisbane tuff and mix it with another stone, and they've made buildings out of that too, like City Hall. Also, when the Brisbane City Council was a bit broke, they tried to mine gold here. That didn't go so well. And on the drive back, I'll go past a big quarry, because I said this is granite, excellent building stone. They also mine in my suburb of the Gap and Capera. Also, in World War II, they used this for the soldiers, and a couple of years ago they wanted to build a zip line. We told them to take a hike. Now, to get to this lookout, you've got to drive along Sir Samuel Griffith Drive. He's a very prominent guy in Queensland history. He's even got a university named after him, which I am an alumnus of. Well, one of the universities I am an alumnus of. You've also got mountain bike trails. The bus takes you up here. You've got a nice little restaurant. Well, you've got a cafe and a restaurant. And I do recommend on New Year's Eve that you book early for the restaurant, because then you can watch the fireworks, which is pretty cool. And I might mention that the Taylor Range is actually an offshoot of the much larger Dagular Range to the west and north. To give you an idea, and this is talking history now, of how tough it was for the convicts in Brisbane. There's a song, and I'm not going to sing, but I'll quote it. I'll quote some of it. One Sunday morning as I was walking by Brisbane waters I chanced to stray. I heard a prisoner, his fate bewailing as on the sunny riverbank he lay. I am a native of Erin's Island, banished now from my native shore. They tore me from my aged parents, and from the maiden I do adore. I've been a prisoner at Port, Macquarie, Norfolk Island and Emu Plains, at Castle Hill, and Kirstoongabbie, at all those settlement chains. But of all those places of condemnation, in each penal station of New South Wales, Moreton Bay, I've found no equal. Excessive tyranny each day prevails. For 3 long years I was beastly treated. Heavy irons on my legs I wore. My back from flogging it was lacerated, and often painted with crimson gore. And many a lad from downright starvation lies mouldering humbly beneath the clay, where Captain Logan had us mangled on his triangles at Moreton Bay. Like the emus and the Egyptians and the ancient Hebrews, who we were oppressed under Logan's yoke, till a native black who lay in ambush did give our tyrant his mortal stroke. Serves you right. Fellow prisoners be exhilarated that all such monsters a death may find, and when from bondage we are liberated, our former sufferings still fade from mind. So, why don't we look at some stuff? Alright, let's zoom in. Alright. There you go, that's the CBD. There you go. CBD. You're over here, this building here, we call, affectionately known as Campbell Newman's penis. He was both a Lord Mayor of Brisbane for a while, built a load of tunnels, and also a very hated Premier that we kicked out after one term because he sacked all the public servants, including my husband, which they pretty much all hired back once we booted him out of office. Right, now what can I show you? See if I can get a shot of the river. I'll get a shot of the river. Ah, there we go. Look, there's a shot of the river. You can see that. And just there, that's the University of Queensland. Now over here, I'm pretty sure they're the mountains. They're not sort of main mountains, but you got like Mount Gravatt and that. See if I can point out Suncorp Stadium. Where is that? And usually, see, I'd probably have to shell out. Yeah, no, probably have to shell out to look through the. Oh, there it is. Hang on. Let's see if I can zoom in. See that little bridge there? That's the William-Devries Bridge, named after the first mayor. So, William-Devries Bridge. Those big towers are actually residential towers for students. And hang on. See that there is Suncorp Stadium. That's the rugby league ground. The Brisbane Roar soccer side also play out of there. Actually used to be called Lang Park after Johnny Lang. So that was the scene of many rugby league battles, and they actually call it the graveyard, not just because it was the graveyard of many New South Wales sides at the hand of the Mighty Maroons, but also because it used to be a graveyard. And they moved a lot of the graves out of there when they built the Toowong Cemetery. There's a lot of unmarked graves at Toowong Cemetery from unnamed people moved from this cemetery, but there's still people buried down there. They say during the 1974 floods that a few lead coffins actually rose to the surface, and they buried them again below the northern try line. So that's cool. Let's see if I can spot the gabba. Okay, I'm going to go a little bit more east. Yeah, that's the gabba. So, yeah, I think, as I said, I'm too cheap to fork out for a telescope, but the gabba is what we affectionately call the Brisbane cricket ground in the suburb of Wollongabba, which means fighting talk place, fighting place talk, something like that, the fighting place, and the scene of many cricket battles, especially with the Poms, but also the AFL side. Now if I go a little bit, look at that, you can see right into the bay, look at that, oh wow, hang on, can I see the port? There's the airport, there's Brisbane Airport, so you can see the bay, and you can also see, it's probably Moreton Island, so in the bay you've got a lot of sand islands, Moreton, north and south, Stratty. That looks like the port there, I think. Gee, the zoom on this thing's good, isn't it? They used to mine sand at Stratty. We told them where to go, although they're not all that happy about it. So, at various times, these Bay Islands were part of the mainland because of the falling and rising ocean levels due to ice ages. There you go. Look at that. Oh, wow. And I might... oh, that's the gabba, I think. Yeah. I think that's the gabba. Or is that Suncorp? Hard to see. A lot of development. I don't recognise Brisbane now. All these high rises. They're there. So there you go. You got your mountains, you know, like Mount Gravatt and stuff. And on a day like today, hang on, struggling to see. Now I might just zoom out a bit, so you can see the mountains. See clear down to. It looks like Archfield Airport. That's not the main airport, but you can see mountains to the south. And I'm going to swing around and you'll see some more mountains clear down to New South Wales. Alright, so what you're looking at now is Mount Tamborine and Mount Warning down in the Gold Coast inland. Hang on, let me zoom in. Look at that. Isn't the zoom on this thing fabulous? My $2,000 camera. Did I not say that too loud? I might get, no, I'm not going to get mugged. But, so, Mount Warning is the Tweed Volcano, one of the largest erosion shield volcanoes around. He was a huge bugger. And obviously after 20 million years and the hotspot nicked off, it's eroded. Let's see if I can swing around a bit more through the trees, and you got sort of Mount Lindsay and Mount Barney, and if I swung around a little bit more, and I'm going to run into people who are out to Ipswich. You can see a little bit of the river. Oh, I can't because, hang on, I'll zoom out again. See a little bit of the river, see a little bit of blue there? Oh, the river's winding its way through Brisbane, and we're going to visit the river in our next video when I go to the Kangaroo Point Cliffs and we have a look at some Brisbane tuff. So that's enough from me. It's getting a bit windy here. It's funny because the breeze should be coming from the sea. It's not, although it's winter, so it does tend to come from the west in winter, but we do generally get a lovely sea breeze here of an afternoon coming off the bay. And if you go to the sea, the foreshore, Redcliffe, Sandgate, Wynnum, Wellington Point, Cleveland, you do get a lovely sea breeze. I grew up in a suburb called Murray, meaning swampy, and that's 10 minutes from the foreshore. Lovely breeze of an afternoon. Doesn't tend to happen too much here in the western suburbs. So that's an introduction to Brisbane geology and to Brisbane itself. Please join me for my next video when I'm across the river from the CBD at Kangaroo Point Cliffs, site of the Brisbane Tuffs, and we'll learn a little bit more about Brisbane and the river and the history of the river and the grief that the river has given the inhabitants here. So Z-Nerd t-shirts available on my website. This is Kathy Williams-Devries from Brisbane, capital of the Sunshine State, Queensland, in paradise here in Australia. Hope you enjoyed this video and you weren't too bored, and I'll see you next time. Hooroo.